Good day. Welcome to Oral Communication in Context, Week 1 Functions, Nature, and Process of Communication. I am Mr. Nelpran Sambalod and I am your subject teacher for this course. What students need to know. This module was designed and written with you in mind. It is here to help you master the nature, process, and function of communication. The scope of this module permits it to be used in many different learning situations. The language used recognizes the diverse vocabulary level of students. The lessons are arranged to follow the standard sequence of the course. This module consists of one lesson, namely, the functions, nature, and process of communication. After going through this module, you are expected to explain the nature and process of communication, understand the relationship of the functions of communication to everyday life, and illustrate the process of communication. Let us have lesson 1, the nature and process of communication. Look at the photo. What can you say about it? You are correct. They are in a conversation. Or to make it understandable, yes, they are communicating. Communication comes in various forms, from the simple nodding of your head, stretching of hands, raising your eyebrows, up to your daily conversations with your friends over the phone, constant exchange of text messages, and regular browsing in social networking sites. These are but some examples of how humans communicate their thoughts, feelings, ideas, and insights. These only signify that humans really engaged in communication. What's in? How will you react to the following picture? Stare at the picture, okay? Believe it or not, your comment to your family is a great joy. Your first cry immediately after birth announced your arrival into this world. Afterwards, your mother understood that when you cry, you were hungry and gave you milk in response. Your face also expressed your feelings. As years passed by, you started pronouncing short words and responded by waving your hands or nodding your head and most of the times laughing out loud. Today, you can act out, speak, and write to tell everyone what you think and feel. These are the ways you communicate. Okay, so what do we have in the paragraph? It only tells us that we humans are born to communicate. Let us find out what's new. When you exchange ideas with someone or you send information to others, you do it in two ways. You either use words to say what you want to say, or you express yourself through gestures and facial expressions. Since then, people have the inherent need to communicate. Humans are social beings. They live to interact regularly with others. In fact, their endurance is due to their ability to express themselves and connect to one another and the world they live in. Second bullet. When you look back in the history of humankind, you will find that early man could not speak as you do today. Records show that people have used various communication techniques such as the use of symbols, gestures, sounds, drawings, and sign languages. Words and languages developed much later in human history. Over the years, communication has progressed tremendously. Language developed side by side with technology. Now, in the 21st century, we realize the power of communication in building relationships and the community at large. Hence, we see the importance of communication. What does the first bullet mean? It tells us that communication can be of two kinds. It can be the verbal communication or nonverbal communication. Whenever we say verbal communication, you have there the use of words, wherein people speak the words that they chose for their ideas. While the second one, nonverbal communication, you have there the use of gestures and facial expressions as humans communicate their thoughts. Also, the first bullet tells us how important communication is in our lives, wherein it is very important that it helps humans to survive. The second bullet. The second bullet tells us to give value on communication. For way back then, humans communicated through symbols, gestures, sounds, drawings, and sign languages. It took years before humans arrived on the level that they can really communicate with fellow humans using words and languages. for words and languages developed much later in human history. The third bullet, it emphasizes the giving of the using of communication, wherein we are urged to use communication, especially now that we are in the 21st century. The technology is too advanced, so we must be side by side with the improvements in the technology. So let us make use of communication. Okay, so that would be all. After knowing the importance of communication, let us find out what are the different ways on how people communicate with one another. Look at the following pictures. Can you identify the different ways of communicating with others? Look at image 1. You have there a boy watching a television show. It seems to be an news show. What kind of communication is that? Yes, that is mass communication. Look at the second image. You have the three girls. They seem to be enjoying their lives, talking with one another. Now the question is, what kind of communication is shown by the photo? Yes, you are right. You have the small group communication. Correct. Then let's have the third photo. You look at it. You have there a girl who seems to be sad because of the wound that she has. Okay. Now, what kind of communication it falls under? Yes, you got it right. That is intrapersonal communication. How about this one? You have there an older girl and a girl. So, what kind of communication? Mm-hmm. So, you have there two people involved in a communication. You call it dyad communication. Okay. How about the last photo? You have here a teacher standing in front of her students. So this type of communication is called public communication. Okay, let's continue. Looking at the pictures, maybe you are reminded of the types of speech contexts. We have two types of speech contexts, intrapersonal and interpersonal. Whenever we say intrapersonal, this refers to communication that centers on one person where the speaker acts both as the sender and the receiver of message. While interpersonal, this refers to communication between and among people and establishes personal relationship between and among them. And we have types of interpersonal context. The first one is the dyad communication. It's a communication that occurs between two people. Small group. This refers to communication that involves at least three, but not more than 12 people engaging in a face-to-face interaction to achieve a desired goal. The public. This type refers to communication that requires you to deliver or send the message before or in front of a group. And the last one, the mass communication. This refers to communication that takes place through television, radio, newspaper, magazines, books, billboards, internet, and other types of media. What is it? What is communication and why do we communicate? Communication is a two-way process of connecting to both living and non-living things. It is also a means of sharing and exchanging messages, information, ideas, and feelings for mutual understanding. Communication connects people and the world they live in. It is through communication that people are able to express their thoughts and ideas or convey information and messages through word of mouth, gestures and signals, signs and others. People have always communicated with one another in various forms. You have already heard several definitions of the word communication, but let us further define communication using the two key terms stated above, message and understand. Communication is a message understood. Unless a message is understood, we cannot say that communication has taken place. Let us send a message to someone and say, where came first? The person who gets this message would wonder what it means, for the arrangement of the words does not make any sense. The message is sent, but the receiver does not understand it. Therefore, for communication to take place, we have to consider two conditions. First, there should be a clear message. Second, the message must be understood by the receiver for whom it is meant. It only means that for communication to take place, the message should be well understood. Let us have the second definition of communication based on the terms message and understand. The second definition is communication is social interaction through messages. Think of someone telling, "It is very warm today." In this case, we are communicating what we experience. The weather being warm is what we feel or experience physically. In this scenario, we are sharing our feeling or experience with someone else. Thus, we may say that communication is a sharing of experience. In our society, we all interact with messages. Without interactions, a society cannot survive. Social interaction is always through messages. To elaborate more, we discuss problems and arrive at solutions. We exchange ideas and interact with others. We transact and then we negotiate. In doing all this, we use communication. Imagine a situation where we are not able to speak and interact with others, or think of a family living in the same house without speaking to each other or relating any form of message to one another. Such a situation can be very lonely and problematic. Without communication, all forms of human relationships will vanish and die. Communication is therefore crucial in building and maintaining relationships. So, what do we mean here? Communication is a social interaction through messages. Communication is not confined in a message alone that is understood by that speaker and by the receiver, but instead it is the giving of message and understanding it, and the message, of course, based from the experience of that person, and the reaction that will be made by that receiver will also be based from his experience. And you have there the multiple message that is being understood or being talked about by these people. And as these people talk about, you call that social interaction. That's like communication is social interaction through messages. Social interaction is not possible without messages being exchanged to each other. Okay? Before we continue, by now, I hope it is clear that communication is a process. Communication occurs between two or more people, the speaker and the receiver. Communication can be expressed through written or spoken words, actions, nonverbal or both, spoken words and nonverbal actions at the same time. Those are the nature of communication. Now let us proceed to the next topic, the communication process. There are also times when we fail to communicate adequately and experience misunderstanding or miscommunication. Why do you think this thing happens? What are the ways to avoid them? We are sometimes misunderstood by the level of speech we use during conversation, by the volume or rate we talk with friends or acquaintances. We may sometimes be misunderstood by the nonverbal actions that we project or incorporate in our speech when talking face to face with people. Also, when we send text or chat messages, we are misinterpreted because those messages are open, brief, and devoid of emotion. But the thing here is what? It is only but natural. It's part of the communication process, okay? Let us now try to consider the process of communication. How does communication take place? Who are involved? What processes are considered? By understanding the communication process, we can also duly avoid misunderstandings and or miscommunications. Now take a look at that picture of a communication process. Let us find out how communication process goes on. So first, we have the stimulus, then you have there the girl or the speaker, then of course the sending channel, then you have there the barrier, then you have there the boy who's the receiver of the message given by the girl. Then you have there the encoding, then understanding encoding. Okay, now let's explain it. So the process of communication goes like this. You have the stimulus, where the speaker generates an idea. Now, the speaker encodes an idea or converts the idea into words or actions. After it, the speaker transmits or sends out a message through a sending channel. But let us not forget that we have communication barriers, okay, or barriers to communication. So, even though we have that, still the message will be sent to the receiver. Now, as the receiver or the boy receives or gotten the idea, then he will decode. He will decode. The receiver gets the message, then the receiver decodes or interprets the message based on the context. So decoding the idea, then you have the encoding, then decoding, then you have the understanding, then afterwards he will be providing his feedback. Okay, based from his understanding, and of course that feedback will be sent to the girl, will be sent to the girl, then the girl will decode and encode also it. Then afterwards, she will be providing also a feedback, not through again her chosen channel. So that's how the communication process goes on, wherein the speaker becomes receiver, the receiver becomes speaker. Okay, so that's how communication process takes place. For better understanding of the communication process, do listen intently. Our everyday transactions with people follow the communication process. As seen in the illustration, communication begins when the speaker or source of communication responds to stimulus and decides to encode or transmit it in the form of a message or a code through a particular channel or means of communication. The receiver decodes or interprets the message sent and responds accordingly based on his interpretation of the message. The response comes in the form of a feedback sent to the original source of communication, sender. As the communication transaction continues, the sender and receiver may exchange roles until understanding is achieved. Barriers to communication sometimes block the transmission of the message, thereby creating misunderstanding. Through this process, we are able to understand that communication is systematic. In the advent of technology, the exchange of information and message in society has advanced and has been a subject of many studies. Now, for better understanding of the communication process, you must be aware of the elements of communication. So, what are the elements of communication? First is the speaker, the source of information or message. Second, message, the information, ideas, or thoughts conveyed by the speaker in words or in action. Third, encoding, the process of converting the message into words, actions, or other forms that the speaker understands. Fourth, channel, the medium or the means such as a personal or non-personal, verbal or non-verbal in which the encoded message is conveyed. Decoding, the process of interpreting the encoded message of the speaker by the receiver. Six, receiver, the recipient of the message or someone who decodes the message. 7. Feedback, the reaction, responses, or information provided by the receiver. 8. Context, the environment where communication takes place. And number 9, barrier, the factors that affect the flow of communication. So you must know the elements of communication so that you will have better understanding of the communication process. Getting to know that the speaker, message, encoding, channel, decoding, receiver, feedback, context, and barrier are all elements of communication and they help in the communication process. Now let us proceed to our next topic, which is the functions of communication. Why do we communicate? Since communication is certain in our lives, it comes naturally and unknowingly. Communication serves many purposes. The following are some of the many reasons why we humans communicate. But before we proceed on the reasons why we humans communicate, look at that image. That image presents one of the functions of communication, and that is the social interactions. So, what are the functions of communication? First, control. Communication functions to control behavior. Yes, that is true. As we communicate, we make use of it to control behavior of other people. It's the same with what a teacher reprimanding his or her students on their unruly doings. Second, of course, what I mentioned, social interaction. Communication allows individuals to interact with others. So social interaction, that's function of communication. Now, for people to socially interact with one another. Third one is motivation. Communication motivates or encourages people to live better. So as we hear words of motivation from people, we are being motivated to go on living despite the situation that we are in. Okay, then number four, emotional expression. So emotional expression is one of the functions of communication in the sense that communication facilitates people's expression of their feelings and emotions. It's our way of expressing our emotions to other people or make it through a song or a poem or on whatever way we express our emotions. And lastly, information dissemination. Of course, information dissemination, communication functions to convey information. Okay? So we make use of communication for us to disseminate information. Now let us find out what are the reasons why humans communicate. Of course, to inform, to misinform, to counsel, to sell. Okay? So to clarify, to buy, to teach, to accept, to criticize, to question, confuse, learn, affirm, deny, express, confirm, persuade, to clarify, to conceal, to promote, to advise, to rebuild, to motivate, and many others. So, if you are going to look at the reasons why humans communicate, also, you have there the five functions of communication. Okay? So, let's continue. From the above table, we realize that communication serves many purposes. Whether we are at home, in school, at work, or at play, people engage in communication. We will discuss these functions in detail in Module 4. What's more, think of communication transactions in your daily life. Enumerate situations where communication takes place. Then, indicate the result of the communication transaction and tell whether it is successful or not by writing the elements that made it so and specify its function in the third column. Use a separate sheet of paper to answer this. So, you will be answering this in your Google form. For you to be guided on what you are going to do in your Google Classrooms, in the Google Forms, we have here an example of a communication transaction. Under column 1, you have their situation. When I was 12, my father told me that I am in charge of cooking the rice every lunchtime whenever I am available. One time, I forgot to cook rice because I got busy on assignment. As a result, we did not have food to eat. My father reminded me again about the task assigned to me. Under column 2, result of the communication transaction. Message was clear that I need to perform my task. At first, the communication was successful. I thought of other family members will do my task because I am doing other things. My fault there was I failed to communicate to them that I am busy doing my assignment. Should I have communicated this earlier, we would have rice to eat. In the third column, you have the function of communication to inform and to clarify. Okay? So this is how are you going to do it in your Google Forms dealing with the what's more activity. After hearing the activity under What's More, you may probably have recalled many situations that occurred from the time you woke up until the time that you are about to sleep at night. This is because communication transactions happen every time we interact with our own selves and with others. We cannot help but communicate. So always put that in mind. We cannot avoid communication. For from time to time, we do communicate. What I have learned. At this point, I would like you to deal with Activity 1, the KWLH chart. Now, based on the details above, fill in the following KWLH chart to see your learning status in this module. Write your answer on a separate sheet of paper, but of course, you will be doing it in your Google Classroom. Check on the assigned task. You can see there the link for the for our Google form. But what can you see in the KWLH chart? You have there what do I know before the start of this module? What concepts or ideas do I want to know more? Then the L, what did I learn from this lesson? Then the H, how did I learn it? Cite samples and situations. So of course, the three topics that we have tackled, we have the nature of communication, process of communication, functions of communication. After accomplishing Activity 1, you may now proceed to Activity 2, Social Media Post. Show what you have learned creatively. Compose a Twitter or Facebook post of your most important insights about the definition, nature, process, and function of communication. Include hashtags at the end of your post. Again, visit our Google Classroom. We are now on What I Can Do. Activity 1, Comic Strip. Create a comic strip showing how you would communicate to your community the advantages of following health protocols and guidelines amidst COVID-19 pandemic in your municipality or province. You may cut out pictures of people or authorities to depict your character, but be sure to write your own original scripts and text. So for this, again, visit our Google Classroom, but you may follow this one, just a page comic strip, okay? For us to learn, if you have learned more about the nature, process, and functions of communication, deal with this assessment. Again, check your Google Classroom. As our last activity for this module, deal with picture talk. Write short conversations using cut-out pictures from magazines, brochures, or any other materials. Consider the nature and process of communication. Be guided by the following rubric in making your output. Use a separate sheet of paper for this. Choose one topic that might interest you. Fake news, ACQ, MECQ, GCQ, use of technology and online communication, gulayan sa tahanan, essential needs versus non-essential needs, and others. For the rubric, we have there the content slash elements, coherence, relevance, and of course, you have there the pointing system 3, 2, 1. Okay? Enjoy doing it in your Google Forms. Thank you. I'll wait for your responses and may you find happiness and enjoyment accomplishing your outputs. Again, I am Mr. Nelpren Sambalod. Have a blessed day.